there's something I can do to make myself look better. If this is the pre-stage,
Take my water.
yes, beam, and you roll up in like pre-stage, and this is the stage beam, and I roll up in like stage, when I take off, when the ambers come on and I floor the throttle and take off, the timing system doesn't start when my car moves. It's got nothing to do with twitching my right foot. It doesn't start till the car rolls 13 and a half inches and reestablishes the stage beam. Well, all I would have to do is stage further in. Now I'm 400ths quicker in reaction time.
Deep stage.
And I didn't do anything different, except for I borrowed that 400ths.
And put my water back.
I don't have the same amount of rollout or running head start before the ET clocks are activated. I just made the crew chief look 400 slower.
So that's gaming your other driver,
That's not
but not
racing smart.
necessarily.
That's letting your ego drive the car.
Okay.
Now in the final round, no problem. But all the rounds before that, lane choice goes to the quicker ET from the previous round. The best chance you have at the quickest possible ET is to barely, shallow stage, barely light that stage bulb, so then you've got over a 1 foot running head start.
Hey, welcome to Car Guy Confessions, brought to you by ARP. I'm Jeff Smith, this is my car buddy Cam Benty, and car builder Steve Strope, and we're going to tell you some stories.
We're good? We're rolling? Hi, everyone. We are rolling. So welcome to another new, I don't know what I'm doing today. All right. Thanks.
Nor do the other two of us now.
Right. So here's a brand spanking new interruption by him. That's our guest. Welcome to Car Guy Confessions. And I am your stand-in host, because usually, as you know, it's Jeff Smith. And then there's Cam Benty. And then there was not. And it's just me, Steve. And we are brought to you, of course, by our wonderful sponsor, arp-bolts.com. Every and any hardware, even in particular people's funny cars.
Check.
Right? You're darn right.
Absolutely.
Check. So I'm also joined by, we'll get to guest in a minute, but this is Jason Lewis. You may have seen him on TV.
A couple times.
With your off-roading e-ventures.
Yeah.
E-ventures.
Yes.
And also, are you still doing the YouTube thing?
I am.
Okay. And plug that.
Into it.
Plug it.
AutoEdits YouTube channel.
AutoEdits.
Yes.
YouTube.
Yes.
And TV stuff anymore, or we're not doing the off-road gig?
I haven't done that in a while.
Off-road every day, dirt every day.
Dirt every day, yeah.
Dirt
I was
every
the
day.
director on that.
But they could watch some reruns.
They can.
They want to see you.
Yeah, that whole world. I was in that whole roadkill and that stuff world for a minute.
Okay, we're done.
So yeah, okay.
So
let's move on.
Now over to this.
The really fast guy.
Again, Fast Jack Beckman, who has a new seat. Hallelujah, praise the Lord, and everything else good. And we need to talk. Because there are some new developments. I think last week, a little bit of medical issue.
Yes, yeah.
So we'll talk about that. But I first need to I've warned everybody I'm going to do a little thank you plug. So I want to, and this has nothing to do with the show, but and he edits it right now. So I am wearing a beautiful new tag here. This is an F1 little chronograph that I love, and I've wanted one for a while. And I got treated fantastic by June Horn, who is the manager. Actually, there's a more special word. I think it was boutique something, curator. I don't know. Anyway, she's in charge.
Walmart, 1995.
No,
I wouldn't know. You're trying to think of a fancy term. I got nothing for you.
No, her card actually says like boutique. I can't remember. I apologize. Anyway, June and her staff, they were at a place near me down in Topanga Canyon. There's a big mall, Topanga Canyon Mall, and there's a Tag Heuer store there, and I want to thank them because they treated me amazing. So this is a shameless plug. And I love my watch. Thank you. Now, moving on. So, out of rotation for a little while, working on elevators for a little while.
Yeah, so you want the quick and dirty on what happened November 2020.
Well, mediumly long and maybe not filthy.
Okay.
But
yeah,
Slightly. Little dirty.
little.
Well, I can get a little dirty. I could throw the word darn in there if you guys want.
Oh.
Yeah, so I had a 14-year career where I made a living driving a nitro funny car. Now, sprinkled amongst
World
that,
champion?
I did. The 2012 funny car championship and the 2003
Golf
Super
clap.
Cup.
Okay,
one.
golf
That
clap.
was,
Give it
that
up.
was pretty
I'll give it
good.
Nice.
And I still continue to work for the Frank Hawley Drag Racing School, but far less frequently than
Did
when
we
that was my
teach
full-time.
there? We taught?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, taught more
Well, I
than
don't know. You
7,000
could be
students.
scraping tires for all I know what you're
Actually
doing.
flew back to Richmond, Virginia 3.5 weeks ago and taught the 2-day class there. And that was
Weekly,
fun.
monthly?
Well, Frank does them probably 30 times a year. And this one, he called me on a Friday. He says, hey, I know your boss has been awesome about letting you take time off to go racing, and we'll get into that in a second. He said, do you think he'll be extra awesome and give you next Tuesday and Wednesday off? He says, I've got a class in Richmond.
Okay.
I'd like you to get up there and teach it. So my lady Christine and I flew out to Richmond, taught that class, got a rental car, hightailed it to Maple Grove for the NHRA National
I'm
event
familiar
there.
with that track.
Yeah, so that was a pretty cool 1 week deal. But back to my funny car stuff. So from 2006, at the end of that year, all the way to the end of 2020, I was paid to be a Nitro funny car driver.
Right.
And
And a darn good one.
yeah, 2020, the world unraveled. Sponsors were few and far between, and it was hard to get them to come to the track to entertain them for the next year. Mine ran out at the end of 2020, and 1 week after my last race, which it was such an odd year, we went to Indy 4 times, and the finals were held in Vegas, not Pomona. But 1 week after that race, I went back to fixing elevators, something I had not done for 22 years.
All of you listening, there's probably a bunch of you that have already seen Fast Jack's name tuned in to listen. You may not know that the ace driver is a elevator repairman. Truth is stranger than fiction. I remember when you first told me that, I thought, because you're a very comical person, I thought you were pulling my leg like, that's a random one to pull out. Elevator repairman. Sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit, right? So how long have you been on off doing that?
Well, so can we timestamp today that it's a weekday today? And
Sure. You were
did-
just repairing elevators?
I did my 8-hour shift. I left from San
No
Clemente.
way.
No.
I drove 2 hours straight up here to come hang out with my friend Steve Strope.
Wow.
Yeah, and so
Real guy right there, fixing your elevator and then racing.
Like
And-
today. Fixing
today,
it.
Today
yeah.
elevator.
Yep. And I love that. It's great work. It's a great union.
You like fixing elevators?
Yes, there's a lot of autonomy.
Does it got a lot of ups and downs?
Don't forget the jerks. Yes. Anywho,
That's actually, I'll give you a golf clap for that one.
It was there. I took it.
It's the low hanging.
Jason, you want to check his water for caffeine?
Yeah,
I
actually,
believe it got dumped in
fine.
his.
They don't allow
Enough
me.
of the Four Loco
So
for you.
I had not driven a Nitro funny car in 3 years and 9 months. I'm not good at finding money. I thought the ship had sailed. I got a 14-year career. I won a ton of races. I won a championship.
Life was good.
Well, nobody ever wants to end their career on any timetable except their own. And the reality is in most motorsports, you run out of money before you run out of the will to go do it.
Sure.
And unlike baseball, your body can keep going. So fast forward to June of this year, John Force, the winningest NHRA drag racer in history.
The man.
By a factor of 2+. Ron Capps is number 2, and he doesn't even have half the wins that Force has. That's how dominant the man's been.
Indeed.
Was hurt bad in an accident
Yes, he
in
was.
Richmond, Virginia, and is currently recovering and doing all his therapy for a traumatic brain injury. And he sounds just like John Force again, and that's just amazing. And we're looking forward to getting him back out to the racetrack as soon as possible. I don't know if that's going to be in an owner's capacity or a driver's capacity, but for 8 races, I got the second opportunity of a lifetime. I am filling in for John Force and keeping that seat warm, and we actually won my first race since 2020.
And you know what? I'm going to remove the hat of doing this show. When I heard, I was so happy and proud of you, and I mean that.
And it's almost been universally that type of reaction, Steve.
And it's for those of you who are most likely drag racing fans who are still watching because of his presence here. You all, I don't even have to say how, in fact, I'll ask you, how, even with the confidence of your talent, because you know what you have accomplished, you know what you were capable of, it has to be at least a little unnerving to go, here's John Force's shoes, fill them.
Yeah, they're this big.
And on top of it, not just his accomplishments or his ability and talents, his legions of fans that you're now in that flopper, you're now flying that colors, and they're expecting greatness that has to have some weight. Not that I expect you to crumble.
So right, the way I've
but
been
that's
asked-
got to
yeah,
be
but-
very humbling.
Yeah.
To go, wow,
Well, that
what am I doing here?
Yeah, Babe Ruth hands you his baseball.
Right. You earned the spot. You're obviously good enough for them to say, you should do this.
Yeah, but you ain't Babe Ruth.
But yes.
Listen, somebody replaced Mickey Mantle when he retired from the Yankees, right?
Sure.
I could remember
No
that
one knows
guy's
his
name if
name.
we had a trivia contest, and he was a pretty darn good ball player. But there was only one Mickey Mantle.
Right.
And I know that. I'm not replacing John Force. I'm keeping John's seat warm. Now,
Fair
whether
enough.
that's for 8 races or 33 races,
That's
I
very
don't
humble
know.
of you. But
Yeah.
I reflect. I was asking to myself, and I waited till this opportunity because I knew you were coming on, to ask you about what is the psyche because you had to go get fit for the car. Right?
Yes.
They changed the seat, I'm
Correct.
sure.
Yeah, move the steering wheel.
And all the rest. And you're like, I'm in John Force's car. And that's probably it's just unbelievably amazing. And on the other hand, it's like, oh boy, that comes with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah, but actually more of the first one. It's like,
Sure.
oh my God, pinch
Elation.
me.
Yep.
My fire suit says peak antifreeze and coolant. And John Force is the only guy that's strapped into a nitro funny car with that fire suit.
Right.
And I get to hop in his nitro funny car.
Like going into Richard Petty with STP.
Right. But
Right.
what, like you say, there's the potential for a lot of pressure or stress in filling in for John Force.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could look at it this way. For 3 years and 9 months, I didn't have a chance to take anybody's nitro car down the drag strip.
Sure.
And now I got a chance to take we're second in points to our teammate Austin Prock and his dad Jimmy. So one of the top 2 funny cars, they said, would you drive this for 8 races? So you can start biting your nails and stressing out over what might go wrong, or you could say, you know what? This is the opportunity
grab it.
of a lifetime.
Yep.
I thought I had every dream that I'd ever wanted in my 14-year career. I got a chance to take 8 more races, and we've already put the car in the winner's circle 2 races ago at St. Louis.
So you look
And again, congratulations,
Thank you.
sir. And I mean that. You know I do.
I know.
Wow. So you look at this as just a chance to execute on the highest level. You didn't see it as like, oh my God, this is so much pressure. You go like, this is my chance to just go and
Yeah,
nail
Jason,
it.
of course there's that nervousness
Right.
and stress.
You're human.
Right, not of driving the car, of competing against the car in the other lane, of doing everything that you can do to your highest level, because Lord knows that car and that team knew how to win races. They were in second place when John got hurt. They'd already been to the winner's circle twice. I was going to be the variable because I was out of the seat for 3 years and 9 months. And like I tell people, when I had a full-time job for 14 years driving a nitro funny car, when I was home on an off weekend mowing the lawn, I was practicing the brake handle, the throttle, making race cars. I was driving a fuel funny car in my head, and I never got rusty. For 3 years and 9 months, I never even thought about sitting in one because it would have been depressing. Why would I practice doing something that I likely
not gonna
wasn't?
go do.
Yeah,
Right.
but when I flew back to get fitted, Steve, like you alluded to, I had to fly back to Indy, sit in the car, pour another seat insert. I went over not just the run procedures, but all the warm-up procedures as well. You don't want to screw that up because that's part of setting the car up for a
Sure,
successful
of course,
run.
of course.
And then I went home and I practiced my butt off on that because I didn't want to do anything wrong there.
So technically, also, I on the phone with you, when I got to ask you a little bit, so there has been advancements made, maybe not super major, in the funny cars. So any competition vehicle is always evolving. So how similar or different is John's car compared to what you drove?
A DSR car.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So Ron Cap's current crew chief, Dean Antonelli, we call him Guido because he likes us to call him Guido. He was my crew chief for my last 3 seasons.
Right.
And I was talking to him the week before I flew out to Norwalk for the Night Under Fire event. John was contracted to drive that event. They were allowed to put a substitute driver in. But more important than that, I didn't have an active funny car license anymore. I had to go out there and
Did you have to go?
had to get my license
Did
again.
you?
Yep. Fortunately, I didn't hit anything. Things went things
good.
went
Hopefully
really well.
you drove decent.
Yeah, but what I told Guido the week before that, I said, if you took my last car, the one I made my last runs in, and set it off to the side for 3 years and 9 months, and I flew out there and crawled into it, it would feel uncomfortable. Even in the off season, November till February when you start testing for the next year, when you crawl back in, your first thought is, I must have gotten an inch taller, or they put thicker pads in here.
It doesn't feel right
It
anymore.
feels too tight. Yeah. So I said, even if you put me back in that car that I was used to, and in that style of car, a Don Schumacher racing chassis, I had made 2,000 runs in there.
Yeah.
It would have felt a little awkward till about the second time you stand on the throttle.
Sure.
So when I got in the Force car, in their shop there in Brownsburg, Chris Cunningham and Tim Fabrizi, 2 of the crew chiefs, and Daniel Hood's the 3rd one. They're saying, well, where do you want the pedal? Where do you want the brake? How about the steering? And I said, I don't know, not because I forgot how to drive a car, because everything would have felt awkward to me at that point. So we moved the minimal amount, and I said, look, let me go run this 10 times, and then I'll tell you if I think I've got a better place to put this there. And that crew was so accommodating. Imagine you lost your driver, who's your team owner, who's the one that gets all the sponsorships, who's the winningest of all time,
An icon.
and you got this guy driving your car. They have treated me, I don't want to say like royalty, they've treated me like one of their own, and I'd much rather be treated that way.
Can you walk me through, from a bit of an outsider's point of view, on that first pass in that car?
Sure.
A little bit of what that was like to just literally hit the pedal.
Yeah,
and
but
go.
let's back up a little further. I had already gotten fitted in the car in Indy, and they pour a seat insert, but when you're done with that, it goes back to that company. They cover it, they vulcanize it, so it's not exactly the same thing you sat on when they were forming it for you.
Sure.
On the harnesses, they had to shorten one side a little bit. I'm a little bit thinner than John. So when we got the car to Norwalk, I didn't want any surprises. So the car was up on jack stands in the pits, and the body was on a cart 30 feet away. In other words, we're not even remotely close to even starting the car, much less running the car. I got in the car, and they start strapping me in there. And as Mark, who must have the strongest forearms of any human being alive, as he's crushing me with the shoulder harnesses, my first thought was, I'm not going to be able to do this. I feel horrible in here right now. Like I feel like I'm a little claustrophobic. This is terrible.
Really?
So then,
With no body on,
we were
you're just in the bucket.
Steve, Jason, had nothing to do with driving the car. It's the fact that you got these side shields, these head pads, this helmet, this head neck restraint, 7-way harnesses.
And none of that's different from 3.5
It's
years.
like
for all
identical,
intents and
but I
purposes.
hadn't done it for 3 years and
Right.
9 months. And I wasn't used to it, and I hated it. Well, so then we dropped the car back down on the ground, put the body on it. I crawled back in, they lowered the body down, make sure I got my sight lines right. Now, when I flew out there for the fitting in Indiana, I took pictures with the body down and me sitting in there so I could go home and hold my camera out and say, when I stand on the throttle and let go of the brake and grab the steering wheel, I want to know what that's going to look like so I could practice closer to real world. Anyway, so it didn't go great
That's a good idea.
the first time getting strapped in the car. We towed up to the lanes. And I told the crew, I said, I want you to tow me around the pits. I just want to get used to, even though you make small inputs on the steering, I want to get used to what that feels like.
Like the ratio and everything.
The
yeah.
weather was changing. The track came and said, listen, if you guys want to make a run, you got to be in the lanes in 10 minutes. So we didn't have the opportunity. Well, actually, I steered it from the middle of the lanes over to the burnout box.
Did you make vroom vroom noises?
Well, so started it up.
I want to know.
Burnout.
I mean,
Yeah.
because you got to go, rah, rah, rah. Or I would, because I'm
I'll tell you,
childish.
Steve, in my head, I absolutely did.
Ah!
I absolutely did. Yeah,
Yay.
it's that Frank Hawley visualization. Make it as real as it can possibly be, and your brain will think that it's real practice.
Okay.
So burnout, back up, rolling up the stage, everything went fine. Stood on the throttle. Racetrack was very hot at Norwalk. In other words, the nitro cars are slaves to the traction, and the traction is a byproduct of how much heat is on that racetrack.
And
We were
humidity.
not going to be able to run 3.85 seconds in those conditions. We could maybe run 3.99, and even though that's a tenth and a half of a second, your butt thinks that's Mount Everest compared to the hill in your neighbor's backyard. It's a big difference, and I'm not downplaying what a 4 flat feels like in one of these cars, but it ain't a 385. Anyway, first run, step on the throttle, not on your foot, Steve. I'm holding the steering wheel.
I'm suing.
Got you.
The car goes out there, starts to spin the tires at 250 foot. I stepped off, slowed the car down, turned off the track. Crew came out, hooked the thing up, and one of the crew guys said, the chutes fell out early. I didn't feel as the chutes falling out early. What happened is as they blossomed, they picked the rear end up a little bit and started to spin the
Oh,
tires.
yeah, okay.
So I need to frame this for you guys so you understand this. If the G meter's here on the launch of the car, and that's about 4.5 Gs for the first 50 feet, that is, oh my God, I've never felt anything like this before,
Right.
and it starts to taper off to about 3.5 Gs. And that's when the fun's about to start. Just when the angel pops up on your shoulder and goes, Steve, you got this.
Yay.
The devil pops
Now
up
mine
and goes,
said something
ready
different.
for this? Then we start stacking ignition timing and clutch on the car. The G meter goes up to 5.5 Gs from 350 feet to 500 feet. So literally when you were out at half track, that car is pulling harder than it is at the
At
starting
launch.
line. And
Right.
by the way, it's pretty hard at launch. My point to you is I missed that bone-crushing acceleration because the tires spun.
Right.
So then I thought, God, I hope they don't think I hit the parachutes early on this one.
Yeah.
And I said, swear to God, that wasn't me.
Yeah, I didn't pull it.
What had happened was that car had never been down the track. The last run that team had made, they watched their driver hit the wall hard and the parachutes didn't deploy. They did several steps to try to make that better. Unintended consequence, one of the release modules they added vibrated enough to pull the cables to deploy the parachutes. We fixed it. My point is, my first run, I'll back up to when I flew out there to get fitted. I'm talking to Chris Cunningham. He gave me all the run procedures. I'm going to practice them in my head. I said, how far are we going on the first run? He said, how far do you want to go? I said, Christmas tree sounds pretty good to me. That's 41 feet. He goes, no. You can take it to half track. Now, we're not really good at math. We used to run 1,320 feet. Half track was 660. There's orange boxes there at 660.
Now it's 500.
Now we only run 1,000 feet. They didn't move the boxes back. So we still call 660 half track, even though it isn't.
Yeah.
I am...
Just before the boxes.
I was overjoyed that Chris had enough confidence in me to tell me I could take it that far. And then the next couple runs, we took it to the finish line and went 4 flat, 308. It's like, okay, let's load it up and let's go to Brainerd. I've got my license. I knocked some of the rust off. We're ready to go.
Right.
And it felt good.
Okay, so you got into a groove. Like you felt...
Yes. And the most important thing was feeling comfortable in the car. And that's a very relative term. I don't mean comfortable like you're ready to doze off and you can't believe how sweet all this padding feels on your body. If you're in there the way you're supposed to be in there, it's uncomfortably tight with those shoulder harnesses because you're not supposed to move around.
You have to be immobilized completely.
Yeah. So what happens is it becomes, as Don Schumacher used to refer to it, like an old pair of shoes. They just feel right when you put them on. He says you should start to feel that way in the cockpit, and it's feeling that way now.
So how'd you get through the tunnel vision that you experienced that first moment in there?
Hey, we'd like to thank our sponsor, ARP-bolts.com. We got a fantastic little backdrop here. They make an outstanding series of bolts, almost anything you would need for engines, chassis, things like that. In fact, we were at lunch today, and the guy asked you about the bolt on the back of your shirt, and and I said, well, it's really about a head bolt. They neck the stem down of the bolt on a short, small block Chevy head bolt, so that the clamp load is even across 3 different head bolt lengths on a small block Chevy. And, so that's the kind of technology that you get out of ARP. And we've all got stories on all that stuff.
Well, for a translation of what he said, call ARPbolts.com.
But the message is that you can't get any better than that.
No, you cannot.
There you go.
Next.
We'd like to thank our friends at InTheGarageMedia.com. They have 3 fantastic magazines. They've got Classic Truck Performance, they have Modern Rotting, and my favorite, All Chevy Performance with Nick, my buddy Nick,
you're
is
so
the editor.
biased.
So yes, of course. But it's a fantastic book. They're doing print media, which is of course our favorite. So
in color and everything.
In color and everything, and you can get your car on the cover of one of those books, which is a fun
that's a
deal.
lot.
Great tech.
Great
written
tech.
by you
not
and others
always
that are
written by me,
famous
but
people.
Yeah.
Famous people
Not
have written all the
always
tech.
written by me.
That's right.
Just
So
pick it
check
up and
them out
read it.
at InTheGarageMedia.com, and they're our friends, and they will thank you.
I told
got
myself
over it, or-
they've already ordered T-shirts. They've already ordered the
pressure
the
of the
autograph
situation.
cards.
There it is.
Yes,
They already ordered shirts with my
yes,
name on it.
yeah. It's I would feel that way once a year, even during my 14-year career.
Sure.
After I had a cold, you get in the car. Now, if you got in without a helmet, it would be a big deal. With a helmet, you're kind of breathing your own exhalations there, and then a guy leans over. Sorry to do this, but he's kind of right in your face like this while he's clamping you in, and now everything's closed off there. And I've always said, you can, if I can stay in there for 5 minutes, I could stay in there for an hour. And what happened at Norwalk, every subsequent run, I started feeling a little more comfortable, a little more comfortable, a little more comfortable. Now, it didn't get cooler. It was an 85-degree day with 85% humidity. So the first run when I'm strapped in there and we're towing up to the water box, I'm sweating pretty good.
Right.
And I said to myself, I don't miss this part of it either. But then after 3 or 4 runs, you're like, you know what? I'll bet you any of those 20,000 people in the stands, or at least 5,000 of them, would give anything to trade places with me right now. I've got the best seat in the house.
Indeed. So after that walkthrough, my technical question would be, has there been advances in the chassis in the car where it's noticeably different to drive it, or no, still a funny car, still same thing?
No and yes. Give two crew chiefs on the same organization identical chassis and give them all the same parts, and then have them pick their crew members, their drivers, and then they go run a year. Those things will start to diverge on the similarities because people just tweak things.
Sure.
Better, worse, and different. They just tweak things. So this car is not a carbon copy of a DSR car. It drives unbelievably well. So did my last DSR car.
Okay.
They had done some things to free up the steering, so it's a little bit less effort, which could be an issue though, because if you're steering it like an old school funny car, you're going to show the fans both sides of the car going down the track. So, but it's still the same fundamentals. It's the same thing we teach at the Holly School. If you drive a Super Comp dragster, you pick your spot down track, you hold the wheel with a light grip, and you make smooth corrections there.
Right. So no radical changes in the chassis, no new technology to get used to, like, oh yeah, now there's this new thing that...
NHRA has, and this goes back 15 years, to try to contain some of the costs, because if you can get one guy that can get $15 million a year for a sponsorship, which is sponsorship to run for a championship in an NHRA Pro Nitro class, is about $3.7 to $4 million to be able to do it correctly. Now, if you've got a show car hospitality, that goes up further, but it's going to take that much in salaries and parts on the car and travel expenses. If somebody had $20 million a year and there was no rules, they'll eventually acquire the biggest talent out there, make their own parts. So NHRA said, look, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. You can't even submit another part for review to get approved unless it's got a safety or cost savings advantage to it, not a performance advantage.
And that's to keep the parity of the class equal, level playing field.
But here's the irony. We keep getting faster. Like the
With
box
that in
keeps
place,
getting smaller, and the crew chiefs but see, they're not looking for 100th of a second anymore. They're looking for 2,000th of a second. But when they do that 5 times, they found 100th now.
Right.
And they just keep finding it.
So is it fair or unfair to call today's funny car a spec car?
Well,
Like NASCAR is kind of evolving to.
Well, it sounds like,
Can we call it a spec car, or is it?
No.
Is there still?
no, they're not a spec car, and I can say that definitively for several reasons. The Toyota, the Ford, and the Chevy Camaro bodies are distinctly different bodies.
Fair
Now,
enough.
if they were primer with no decals and headlights on them, they don't look necessarily like a Camry or a Mustang or a Camaro, but they do look decidedly different from one another.
Okay, so under the skin.
The chassis, you're dictated 125-inch maximum wheelbase. Front stagger, maximum of 2 inches. Minimum weight, minimum of 2,600 pounds with driver after the run. And then you can kind of do your own thing from there. So no, I wouldn't call them a spec car in any true sense of the word. What I would say, though, is the paradigm is there. When you don't have the rules that everything goes, you end up with things that look very similar to what the competitors have.
Quick question on the fabrication. Like, I'm curious, when you mentioned the hit, when the power really comes on mid-track.
Yes.
I've noticed the fabrication skills and shops are able to execute at a higher level. Does a chassis put that down better? I know that must be.
Yes.
First,
yes.
I want to know what that's like
so
to hit that.
Gary Densham still runs what we call a stiff chassis or a hardtail chassis. And they're actually more efficient when you press the throttle down, because there's not a lot of give and flex and heat friction that gets dissipated on that car. It all gets transferred to the rear tires and the car moves. Right. So an apples-to-apples tune-up, I think Gary Densham's chassis might be a few thousandths quicker than a John Force chassis. But there's a whole lot more racetrack after that. The slip tube chassis, which is what a lot of the top teams have gone to, allow the upper and lower frame rails to kind of move independent of one another and absorb the imperfections on the racetrack and keep the rear tires planted.
Wow. So the fabrication skills have come into play a little bit with that, and that's the engineering, that's that back of the shop, that's been going on in NASCAR and all the race
You can go to
series.
Murph McKinney. He's been building Top Fuel and funny car chassis for, gosh, I don't know, 40 years plus, and a lot of people line up at Murph McKinney's. Don Schumacher Racing and John Force Racing both have in-house chassis shops, as do several other teams now. It fixes two things. You don't go to the back of anybody's line. Right? The availability is how much overtime can your guys work to crank out spare cars.
Course, right.
And you can hide any potential improvements in that car from someone else seeing them.
Is it still, I already basically know the answer to this, but putting it out for people who are probably fans, but maybe don't know everything about stuff. I know it's still a game of somebody knowing how to set up clutch, because it's allowing all that slippage at first, and then all that power to come in, like you're saying, 500 feet, 350 feet.
Yes.
Otherwise, you just annihilate the tires.
Let me dovetail this into what Jason had asked about when it gets further out, the G-forces go up. And I'll try to give you the 101 and not get off track. Our clutches are a centrifugal clutch, not altogether different from what a scooter would have on it. When you're sitting there with the scooter, you don't have to hold the thing to keep it from rolling forward like a motorcycle. You don't have to hold the clutch in. When you rev it up, centrifugal force applies more clutch, transfers more of the torque to the rear tires, the car goes faster. Our clutches have 6 discs.
Yeah, it's a multi-stage.
Well, you've got flywheel, you've got disc floater, disc floater, disc floater, disc floater, disc floater, to the pressure plate. So you've got 6 discs, 5 floaters, a flywheel, and a pressure plate here. And at the end of a run, when we tow back to the pits, now you've added 12 minutes to the end of the run, take the bell housing off, that iron is 800 degrees at that point. That's why you need so many discs.
Is 800 degrees.
There's
think after cool down.
Well, it gets
and that's
over
after being baked for 4 seconds.
Yeah, that's right.
It gets to over 2,000, and you say that's ridiculous. I can say no, because we know the breakdown of the metals in there, and you can see which ones have smeared because of the heat.
Right.
So it's 2,000 degrees on a haul butt run. But there's 18 levers on that. When I roll up and pre-stage the car, I've got a handbrake and a foot clutch. And the only thing I'm using the clutch for is to keep heat the clutch pedal is to keep heat out of the clutch disc when I'm backing up or pulling forward. I'm holding it in as much as I possibly can. When I light pre-stage, which means you're 7 inches from the starting line, the other driver's ready, I'll take my foot off the clutch. Now I'm holding it with the handbrake. It's idling at 2,500 RPM.
So clutch is engaged but slipping.
Exactly.
Right. Brake is holding car in place.
Yes. And then I will bump it in until I'm on the starting line in position. When
green hits.
Well, Amber's hit. You wait till
once the green hits.
Yes.
I know
you should be on your way.
I know you're already on it. But
so when you floor the
let
throttle,
go and hit it.
That engine RPM goes from 2,500 to 8,500 in a tenth and a half of a second. Those levers start to swing outward and clamp the discs together, and you start to send power to the rear tires. But the track will never handle the torque we've got available. So we only are using 6 of those 18 fingers at this point. The rest of them are held out by the throw-out bearing. Think of having a really smart left foot where you can actually just apply the clutch in stages.
You can feather it right at the release point.
So what the crew chiefs do is they program, we've got 6, 7, or 8 different timers in the clutch, triggered by a switch underneath the throttle pedal. So every one of those timers goes to a flow control solenoid. Those solenoids bleed a little hydraulic fluid out of that pressure plate and let it apply more clutch. All of those solenoids have it. You can make a big jet, you can make a little jet. So you got 8 timers, 8 flow solenoids, 18 levers, a lot of ways to screw up a tune-up. So what happens is once I get out to 30 feet, those rear tires aren't round anymore. They're doing this like a tank track, and they're not happy. We have to take a ton of horsepower out of the car. So we let 20 degrees of timing out, let the tire kind of relax for a second, and then we start hammering the clutch application and putting the ignition timing back in. And that's why, just about the time your mind said, I've got this, the G-forces just take off and shove you back in the trunk.
Wow. And that's when you go into kill mode, right? When the tires are happier and the
that's when you go into the why the hell did I sign up for this job? Or, oh my God, this is the coolest thing ever.
Right.
But think about the intricacies, what the crew chiefs have to do to predict track temperature, which affects traction, weather conditions, which affect horsepower, and then the myriad of tune-up deals. You got nitro percentage, ignition timing, blower overdrive, compression ratio. All those things are changed virtually every single run.
From being around the nostalgia nitro funny cars that I were around and watching Frank Aldana and Garrett Bateman, and it's amazing. And those situations aren't anywhere near as complex as the new stuff.
We have completely ruined what was once a really simple class. Yes.
The amazing thing is, just in the clutch, forget the timing, forget everything else, the amount of math and science into deciding what clutch disc and when each stage is going to lock up
how much
within a second of time.
We're talking microseconds at this point, right?
Well,
like
but even if you're doing a 3.5 or 4 second run, your first second and a half is a whole lot of shit.
For the sake of argument, timer 1's 1.1, timer 2's 1.6, timer 3's 1.7. It's all in that range.
Yeah.
And if the clutch wears different than we predicted, it affects the tune-up. If it wears way too much, those levers stand up higher, gives it more leverage, that screws it up. It can slow it down, but then it can cause it to smoke the tires when those levers hit hard. If it doesn't wear enough, it tends to kind of get a little bit lazy, and then it gets aggressive again after that. So if we want to wear 130 thousandths on an average run, and we're wearing 170 thousandths, well, I told you there's 6 clutch discs and 5 of these floaters in between, and the floaters all have grooves cut into them. If you need more wear, you exchange it for a floater with more grooves. If you need less wear, you exchange it for a floater with less grooves. You're chasing this stuff all year long. Oh, by the way, those 6 clutch discs.
Because every track is different, every temperature is different.
Well, the 6 clutch discs are usually from 6 different batches.
Clutch guy needs a raise.
Yeah, it sounds like that.
And we run out of discs 1, 2, and 3 sometime in the middle of the year. So you're trying to stay on top of your clutch inventory. You'll order them from the clutch manufacturer. You'll bring them into your shop, hub them, put them on your blower dyno and your clutch dyno, get a traction number on the disc, put them back to inventory, but you still got to put them in the race car. So if we're qualified solid on Friday, Saturday we'll throw a brand new disc in to see how it's going to work, because we'll have, say, 8 more runs with our original 6 discs, and then we're going to have to replace one. Then 22 runs later, we got to replace another one. We're out of that inventory. Then 30 runs later, we're out of that inventory. And you're doing this all year long. Right. Literally every
you're always
event
chasing it. So again, from being around Garrett, great driver, we would run like up in Bakersfield, the off-road track.
Some would call it that. I love Famoso. I got so many great memories at that drag
I love
strip.
being there too, but there are a couple of times where he was down and it was either shaking the tower or it was breaking loose, and his car at that time had a 2-speed, a manually shifted 2-speed, and I know you know what I'm talking about, of course. And he would use that to load, shift in high, load it down, settle the car down so it's not blowing the tires off her. So you're in your car, the situation is happening, what Garrett would explain to me, like it's shaking, he wants to load, he's going to drop it into high. You do not have a lever.
No.
You do not have a manual option.
All of
yours is just throttle?
Well, all of ours is programmed before we start the car. We are allowed data acquisition. We are not allowed to use the computer to control any function of that car. Not like F1. Although in 4 seconds, I'm not quite sure how you could do that anyway. But what you're talking about with the nostalgia cars and the NHRA fuel cars, they're a little bit less than half the horsepower of the big show cars.
Yep.
So they need a 2-speed to get some gear ratio to get that car moving. Ours don't. They make such.
But some of them were pneumatic. I had watched other people pneumatic.
Yes.
Garrett, we use
if
manual.
you got a Lenko, it's easy enough to convert it to a push button, or you just pull
But
the
you
ship
do
button
not
out.
have that option.
Correct. I wish we had to have one mandatory driver-operated function inside the car during the run.
For transmission?
Just anything.
Anything.
You had to do something.
How about if it releases balloons?
But, there you
Okay,
go.
as long as they come up. But I'm saying,
as long as the driver has to
yes,
do it. Yeah.
It would be cool for the driver, because back 30 years ago, the driver's functions inside the car could actually affect the ET on the scoreboard. Assuming I stage in the correct spot, I don't drive excessively, I don't get the car out of the groove,
As long as the tune's on.
Right, but I'm saying the best number that's going to come up on that scoreboard is what the crew chief's put in. I can't make it go any faster, but I could screw it up and make it go slower. So I think it would be awesome to push some stuff back into the driver's lap and say, we'd like to see the drivers who are
Because right now,
stand-ups.
you can just succeed at failing.
I just close my eyes and scream for 4 seconds and deploy the chutes.
So you're critical is cutting a good light.
Correct.
That is
false.
solely on you.
straight.
But listen, if you watch pro golfers, they make it look so easy, you start to believe it's easy. You watch drag racing, you're like, what's a straight line? How can you screw this up? It's no big deal.
Oh, I know better.
So reaction time makes a big difference, but there's also a lot of little things inside the car. It's how smooth you are with the steering, it's groove management going down there. It's not staying on the throttle too long. You don't want to hurt your good supercharger, and then you can't use it for the rest of the weekend.
So that's long lead, what they call racecraft, where you really have to apply that driving technique to
help
your team. Help the team.
Like a lot of things in life, people will call us athletes and say it's a sports deal. Whatever. If that makes us sound sexy, I'm all for it. It's a mental sport. It's a mental sport out there. And in most mental sports, it's not incredibly difficult to get good at that. It's incredibly difficult to get great at that. to the John
And
Force level.
consistent.
Well, but I think when you're great, by
You can
definition,
stay
you're
consistent.
consistent. Because
Fair enough.
you can
Fair
be
enough.
consistently bad, too.
So
Right?
that
Yes,
brings-
I excel at that.
Yes.
My head goes immediately to you're jumping back into this. You get that phone call. All of a sudden, you're getting fitted for a seat in a top tier team and car.
The
and
top
you're-
tier,
and-
actually.
Right.
Yep.
And now you're at the tree where there's known head games. Even as an outsider, I know that that is a place where drivers mess with each other mercilessly.
Yes.
How do you do that? What have you?
I do the best that I can. Right now, the class of the funny car
You
field
just
is-
focus on you?
Yes, because nothing else would make me better. In fact, there's a high probability it would make me worse, focusing on someone else. And the highlight, my teammate Austin Prock has been the best at reaction time in funny car this year. He's the class of the field. He's about 200ths better than me. Now, there's something I can do to make myself look better. If this is the pre-stage,
Take my water?
yes, beam, and you roll up in like pre-stage,
asked.
and this is the stage beam, and I roll up in like stage, when I take off, when the ambers come on and I floor the throttle and take off, the timing system doesn't start when my car moves. It's got nothing to do with twitching my right foot. It doesn't start till the car rolls
Breaks the
13 and a half
beam.
inches and reestablishes the stage beam. Well, all I would have to do is stage further in. Now I'm 400ths quicker in reaction time.
Deep stage.
And I didn't do anything different, except for I borrowed that 400ths.
And put my water back.
I don't have the same amount of rollout or running head start before the ET clocks are activated. I just made the crew chief look 400 slower.
So that's gaming your other
That's
driver,
not
but
racing
not
smart.
necessarily.
That's
yeah.
letting your ego drive the car.
Okay.
Now in the final round, no problem. But all the rounds before that, lane choice goes to the quicker ET from the previous round. The best chance you have at the quickest possible ET is to barely, shallow stage, barely light that stage bulb, so then you've got over a 1 foot running head start.
Right.
And the great drivers, the Ron Capps, the Matt Hagans, J.R. Todds, Austin Prock, they don't cheat that.
Okay.
They work on their reaction times. They don't say, well, I'll make myself look like the hero and bump in. I'm 300ths quicker than I normally would be, but your car's 300ths slower. You just borrowed that from another part of the time slip.
Wow.
So that's not even gamesmanship.
I don't think people realize that.
No,
that's
that's
going
just
on, yeah.
not racing
Well,
smart.
and the thing is the guys in the tower don't announce it that way.
Right.
They go, oh my gosh, look at his freaking reaction.
I've had
Yeah.
this,
Reaction
this
time, yeah.
talk with Alan Reinhart and Bob Fry ad nauseum over the years. And Bob Fry said, look, I get all that stuff. It's mathematics, it's physics, I get it. The average person not only doesn't get it, they don't care. I'm going to call them as it comes up on the screen.
Right.
And boy, when you hear that from the announcers, you think,
Well, that's
gee-
disappointing.
well, gee, I don't want to have slow lights.
Right.
I'll just roll in a little bit. You can't believe my buddies will text me, yeah, your lights weren't really good that race. And you know how long it would take me to articulate this
Yeah.
explanation?
This exact thing,
And then
yeah.
Yeah,
one
it's
of
not
two
worth it.
things will happen.
Just tell
They'll
them to
go,
watch this one
Yeah,
and they'll
one
get
or
it.
two.
We'll
They'll
explain
either
it to
say,
them.
well, that took 20 minutes out of your life, but thank you for explaining. I think I understand. Or they'll
Yeah.
say, why can't you just have better lights? I'm like, I give up.
Right.
I give up.
But that's a cool factor that I think that gets understated at the gamesmanship and creates real driving. That's what you bring to the table. Like,
Yeah,
right?
but I would point out that even though we're a sport of numbers, and it sounds empirical, you can fudge those numbers by where you park that
Right.
car on the starting line. So in qualifying, there's no question you're after the quickest possible ET. So everybody in qualifying is just inching up into that stage beam, and you'll see the good drivers even flicker it. That means I've got 13 and a half inches of a running start before the timers even activate my ET. I'll get the best possible ET for my current tune-up. But boy, on race day, the egos go to crap, and everybody wants to chunk way in there to make
Yeah.
themselves look like Superman, and it's not.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff going on.
What do you hate, if I may? What is the thing as a driver? You have under 4 seconds from start to finish. What is the thing that you feel from the seat that you hate? Like it's the thing that you dread having to deal with?
I can't think of one, but the suspenseful part is because of where we sit in the cars, the visibility out the sides is negligible. If you're 2 feet, depending on what kind of body you're driving, if you're 2 feet to 5 feet behind your opponent, you can't really see them. And what really is a punch in the gut is when you're hauling butt down there. You got your spot, you're going to hit the chute, lift off the throttle, and your wind light's not on. And you look over quick, and there's this. And then all of a sudden, you see their nose poke out. You're like, oh, I thought we were ahead. Right. It's almost impossible to monitor them. Not that you would want to be looking down track and...
Yeah, looking at, you got other things.
It doesn't sound like there's a lot
yeah.
to time
yeah.
even
but
for
that's
that.
always a punch in the gut. When your butt tells you you're hauling butt,
Yeah.
you don't see them, you think, we got this, and then the other wind light comes on. But the opposite of that, the final round in St. Louis, our guys wicked it up. They turned up the clutch flows, made this thing hopped up. Well, it went out there, dropped one cylinder. In other words, balancing the fuel flow.
A hole?
Yep,
Yeah.
balancing the fuel flow with the load is tough to do. It washed out one cylinder. And by the way, our spark plugs, we got 50 amp mags to each spark plug.
This is so awesome.
But we still only run a 12 thousandths gap on the spark plug because if we widen it out more, it'll get blown out by the cylinder pressure. It's stupid how these cars work.
Is it still, you guys, you're 2 plugs in the hole, right?
Correct.
You're not running 3.
Nope. They tried that back in the 90s,
Yeah, I
and then
remember.
I said, nope, 2 is max.
So-
For the person at home, though, you're wanting 12 thousandths, and a normal car these days is 28 thousandths.
No,
right? Something like that.
your muscle cars are all 35 thousandths. The new fuel injected cars are 70 thou.
Oh my God.
Because
Okay.
they don't make that sort of cylinder pressure. We're
Right.
putting 60 pounds of boost on top of a gallon and a half per second of fuel flow in that engine.
Jesus Christmas.
Gallon and a half per second.
Right.
But to what I was saying though, we dropped a cylinder on the right side. Well, our pipes are pointed up, out, and back. So if you drop a cylinder over here, you're losing, it equates to 175, but that's because it's a 2-stroke engine with 4 revolutions. It's really almost 800 pounds of peak thrust coming out of each pipe. So if you drop a cylinder on this side, the car moves this way because it's got less thrust to balance it.
Wait, you're saying downforce is created by the
Oh, yes.
exhaust?
Yeah,
because-
concussion,
Yes, well, look, not only downforce, forward momentum,
because it's pushing.
Oh, thrust.
and
Oh my
we
God.
can't point them straight up. If you look now, they're burning the decals off the sides of the bodies. So we have to angle them out somewhat. So that means it's trying to push in on the car. If you lose one on this side, this one's pushing and it's going to move the car.
It's offsetting
Yeah.
counterbalance.
So ours dropped a cylinder.
So you feel this from the
Then it
seat.
dropped another cylinder, and I'm in the right lane, and it starts moving over towards the wall, and I'm cranking the wheel, and I went, oh, and then my wind light came on. This is kind of the opposite of the story I was telling you about
Yeah.
not seeing. And it was an 11,000th wind light over Ron Capps, but I thought for sure he was going to drive around us on the top end.
So you fed all the steering you could because it's heading that way.
Yeah.
You're trying to counter.
Yeah,
All
but
the steering.
Well, remember, all the steering's a relative deal. You can only go over to the wrist.
Okay.
You wouldn't go, you know what, I got this. Let me just
Yeah.
turn the wheel like this.
I mean, you don't have a necker knob?
Yeah,
You can just
and think about this, Jason.
look up necker knob.
As soon as I lift off the throttle, all the weight goes back on the front tires. And if you've got the tires pointed left, that car's going in the other lane. So you've got to remember when you step off, snap that wheel back to
Because
straight.
weight transfer comes back, all of the
Well,
steering comes back.
the front tires, if you're really on a haul butt run, they're not off the ground, but the left front might be just barely off for
Skimming.
the first 200 feet. And the right front is so light on the ground, you don't have a lot of authority. It's not till you get going fast enough that the aerodynamics start
the
pushing
nose
down and giving you some front load that now the car starts rolling. Well, we watch a video of one of my qualifying runs at Dallas, and it goes out there and then goes left a little bit. Well, what happened is it was going out there, I'm trying to correct, and the front tires aren't doing anything, and as soon as I get some aero on the thing and it pushed it down, it starts to move, and then I got to correct for that correction.
Right.
So a couple of things. I got 2 questions, but 1 statement. If I remember right, by a half track, the tips of your spark plugs are already gone, burned away, and it's dieseling the rest of the way down?
In the old days, yes.
Or has
In
that changed now?
Well, because of the volume we run, it'll wash it out. In the old days, there was one car that spit the mag out at 500 feet and still ran to the quarter mile because nitro can pre-ignite.
Right, you got so much heat in
It's
the
hard
head.
to light nitro with a match, but you put it in a container and hit it with a hammer. Like a lot of these guys are driving a head stud into the block in the old days, and it might have a little bit of nitro at the bottom of the stud. They drive it in and it shoots the head stud and a chunk of the block out. So pressure can ignite nitro. Now we run so much volume, if it burns the ground strap off that plug before the finish line, it's probably going to drop that cylinder, unless the other plug in that cylinder can keep it lit.
So when you would ask, like, what's the things that you don't want to happen in the car? In your history of driving, we can go all the way back, Have you experienced, which I'm sure, a blower letting go?
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can YouTube it. New Hampshire, Epping, 2016. That's a pretty good one. Yeah.
Because you're front row for that,
if
right?
a picture's
Like
worth 1,000 words, that one's worth 100,000.
I want to know the concussion
Yeah.
Yeah.
coming off of that.
So that's a great
I'm assuming
question.
that wakes you the hell up.
Well, on that particular run, and I don't know if you guys can pull that up to watch it, some of the track guys, they're all my friends, came up later and said, we had to get a forklift and move a section of the wall back 1.5 inches. And I said, that's not even possible. He said, Jack, go look at the back of the wall. And
Now, is this from flying projectile parts or just the concussion from the blower letting go?
just the concussion,
Jesus
just
Christmas.
air moving. So,
Wow.
but remember,
I can't-
That's
in a
what I'm
funny
saying,
car,
right?
in a funny car, you've got a firewall between you. Now, in the case of, and if you guys can pull this up, it would really illustrate this point well, that firewall redirected a whole lot of that concussion. I've watched
Luckily
Caps-
for you.
Well, I've watched Caps get out of his car, and it looks like he just got knocked out and got back up. Just all the energy's out of you from the concussive blast
Right,
of that
sure,
air.
yeah.
For me, a couple times I've got out, my ears have been ringing, but knock on wood, it hasn't been to the point that I felt like, man, I'm getting dizzy now.
So that one, and two, have you experienced the joy and fun of an in-car fire?
Plenty of times, yes.
Right.
In
And
fact,
I know this, but
yeah, I've had 6 times where we.
so is that good and terrifying? Or like, I got Halon, we're pulling the pins, we're going to be okay, or I'm locked in here except for that flap on the top.
Yeah, so it blows up. I've had 6 where it's blown up enough that the body came off the car.
Yeah,
And
that's a good enough hit.
that's not a
that's
bad
enough something
thing
happened.
because it takes a lot of that fire with it.
Gives it a place to go.
Okay.
The problem is the oil coming on the visor. And you'll watch in a couple of them, you watch me reach up and wipe my visor off because I want to be able to see. But you don't really have time to be scared. And this isn't a bravado thing. It's as soon as the bodies come off, my concern is don't hit the wall or the other driver.
Or the other
so you're
driver,
trying to
of
get
course.
this thing and it's bouncing because the concussion pushed the car down and compresses the slicks and
And
then
then
they
it's
bounce
letting
up.
go, recoil,
Yeah, so your objective
cause and
is
effect.
All of that stuff.
yeah,
is-
get it stopped without hitting somebody or something. And if you see me these 6 times that get out of the car, I look pretty calm because I'm thinking, I didn't hit anything. That could have been way worse.
Right.
It's not like you're driving down the freeway, somebody starts swerving and losing control in front of you and you have to hit the brakes and move over. Then you get that hot feeling all over your body, that instinctive
Right.
The adrenaline
Yeah,
washes
fight or
through.
flight.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's like you don't get that. Maybe because when they started the car before you made the run, you started to get that. But I'm saying I think we're already at such a heightened sense of awareness, and if you're
That your job is to solve the problem,
yeah,
not save the butt.
yeah,
Solve the problem.
Crashing planes would be inordinately expensive to train pilots, so they put them in simulators, right? And they throw all kinds of scenarios out.
It'd probably also be a problem, let
Yeah.
alone more expensive.
We don't really have a simulator to simulate big explosions for us. So
Do they have a drag racing simulator that is accurate?
I don't know. My son's big into the NASCAR, and I know they've got that stuff dialed into
Same
the
with the
racetrack.
F1 guys.
Yeah, and I'm guessing with drag racing, because it's 2-dimensional, it's a straight line,
The chair would have to pull the, how do you get the G's?
Yeah, and also, right, there's not the amount of money in drag racing as in F1 or cup racing. But having one
And
of
the
those
tracks
things.
don't change.
Yeah, well, they all have their
Not a lot of
idiosyncrasies,
corners
yeah.
to
You have to
memorize.
memorize that, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where the end is, right over there, where the flag is.
But to answer your question, yeah, I've checked all of the above, all the things that you don't want to have happen in a funny car, but I spend a lot of time thinking about if this happened, what would I do? I watch a lot of the races on TV. I've watched what a lot of drivers have experienced there and say, okay, if that was me, what do I do? So in several of mine, when the body's blown up, you're going to see my right hand over here. And the first one was 2012 Thursday at the
Is
World
the hand
Finals.
going for the handbrake? What does
Well,
the hand do?
Great question. ESPN at the time, the guy comes up and he goes, that was brilliant. You were blocking the fire with your hand. I said, what are you talking about? He says, come here and look. And he pulls up the still, and I looked at it. I said, I was reaching for the parachutes, which are on the body, which is 400 feet behind me. But I didn't have that time to think.
These will work.
Yeah, like it's over there somewhere.
In my mind, it
There
was
are no chutes now.
shoots,
Yeah.
brake, fuel shut off, and then if it's on fire, fire bottles. You don't have time to think and process that.
Right.
You have to practice it before it happens.
But
And
that's
so
also-
you react.
Yes.
Your brain
that's
didn't go,
exactly
what am
right.
I doing?
that's-
There's no body, there's no chutes.
Yeah,
I'll
might
skip
as well
that
just
one.
ride this one out. But,
Yes.
but that's what you're doing.
Some drivers do.
when you're off, when you're out of the, like you say, when you're mowing the lawn, you were going that memory. forcing that
Visualization.
Just,
Yep.
you're just making all.
I'm
of
in the
that
race
stuff
car. I'm in the race car. I'm in the
second
race car. I'm in the
nature.
race car. People say, "Oh my God, this is no." It's not second nature, and that's my point. Or it's not instinctual, which a lot of people falsely label it as. It's reactionary. Reactions are actions without conscious thought. It means you consciously programmed yourself. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this.
Stop, drop, and roll.
There's nothing
But on a-
second nature.
But in a race car.
300 mile an hour. Yeah.
And when people say, "Oh, look back, man, it's just like riding a bike," it's not just like riding a bike after 3 years and 9 months. And,
That's a lie.
And this is not me being humble. This is me understanding my limitations. I'm not that good that after 3 years and 9 months, I just climbed back in the car and everything would come back to me. I went home and practiced my butt off after I sat in that car. And I still practice it now.
Right.
Because I'm not that good that it's second nature. I have to work on this and program.
So, I've got the high sign.
Oh.
But there's a couple of things I want to go over with him. So everybody hang in there. One, well, a little bit ago, days ago,
2 days ago.
2 days
2 days ago, yeah.
you had a doctor's note,
Haven't got that yet, but I spent the night in the hospital.
and you did not drive. And so that there are no rumor mills, I'm sure a lot of facts are out, but from your lips, what happened? What is
Well,
it?
first,
What
let me
was-
describe. Friday we ran good. Saturday we ran good. All 4 of our qualifying runs were in the 3s. We got a lot of bonus points, and we ended up the number 3 qualifier. We were in a great position on the
position.
ladder. Our teammate Austin Prock was on the other side of the ladder, and as it turned out, he lost in the semis. If we could have won that race, we really could have tightened the points deal. I think not racing there ended our championship hopes unless there's some sort of miracle. But I woke up Sunday morning and went to walk to get ready in the restroom, and the hotel room started spinning.
And this is, just for people who don't know, which race was this?
This was Dallas, just literally 2 days before we're filming this now.
Okay.
And I had only ever experienced vertigo back in 1994, twice in my life. I don't wish it on anybody. Now, I hear a lot of people have gotten vertigo without the nausea. I have not been so blessed. When I felt that way, the 2 times in 94, and now you can't hold anything down. My girlfriend Christine loaded me up, took me to the emergency room. They did an MRI, they did a CAT scan, and they said, okay, everything looks normal there. Must be an inner ear thing. Don't know. Still going to follow up with my doctor and see if I can get a beat on it, because if I don't know what caused it, you can't mitigate it happening again. But it was incredibly disappointing. Had a wonderful race car, kick butt team, and I didn't get a chance to take our car into the winner's circle for those guys.
So the episode lasted longer than just the morning, obviously. You were in
Oh,
down
let's
for the day,
see.
2
Yeah,
days?
it started at 7 a.m. I didn't want to even move till Christine was trying to get me at 10 o'clock to go to the hospital. I think it was 1:30 we went there, and the drive there was miserable.
Oh, right, because you're now in motion, right?
My God,
Oh, my
yes.
God.
That she got a
Yeah.
wheelchair and rolled me in, and getting rolled into the wheelchair was miserable. And I kept my eyes closed, and apparently they sent me to admitting, paperwork, insurance. I must have made 17 little trips there. And I'm like, oh my God, it's miserable. So they gave me some IVs. I'd already taken 2 meclizines at the hotel, didn't do anything. I'd taken an anti-nausea, didn't do anything. So
Everything else looked good to the
yeah, they
docs?
didn't. There was inconclusive. You
So
know,
we're how many days out now?
2.
2 days? And how are you now?
Well, I worked all day today fixing elevators. I
right.
still, I would say,
Doesn't sound like a good thing.
yeah. Well, I
Wiping it down,
did not
opposite
get
of
on
what you
top
need,
of any
yeah.
today, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not 100%, but I mean, I can function. I couldn't function. I'm telling you, when you got vertigo at that level, you can't function. There is literally nothing that you can do. You can't eat, drink, move, or stare at anything.
And you're helpless because you can't
What do you do?
overcome it. You're just
No. What do
going
you
along
do?
for the ride.
Yep. Yeah, not a fun place to be, and add in the fact that I let down the entire team. Obviously not intentionally.
Yeah.
I don't know that it could have been eliminated in any way, shape, or form, but you still let your team down. That's not a fun feeling.
Do you have any prognosis, or are you just seeing how it goes right now?
Well, you know how most hospitals go, well, it's not this, and it's not this, and it's not this, so it's probably that or that.
Okay.
So I'll follow up with an ENT and see if but in 94, they did this battery of tests. I mean, like, probably an inner ear infection or a viral deal.
Right.
And it never happened again for 30 years.
Oh. I hope that. for
Until now.
you. Yeah. Well, I hope that
Until
for you.
now.
I hope
Yeah.
it's fast.
So wrapping up, the microphone is yours. moving forward, we have opportunities, we have races coming, which I will be there for a couple of them. Come cheer.
We only have 2 left. I hope you're coming
I'll be
to
at both of them.
Yep.
Calm down.
Yep.
So
He gets cranky.
I'm sorry. I didn't have my, well, he took my water. Looking at next season, you're still in a chair, right? You're still
I
got a
don't
seat?
know. I don't know. I'm not quitting my day job. The car I'm
That's
driving.
almost funny.
The car I'm driving is very much John Force's car. And it's
Understood.
John Force's decision whether he wants to get back in that car or continue on. And then if it's B, that, or if he just wants to continue on with another driver, then the question is it me or is it another driver?
Understood.
If they ask me, the answer is hell yes.
Right.
Just so you know, okay?
That's good.
Yeah, though that's where I was going.
Yeah. And again, I love the elevator trade, and that's why I'm still working on elevators
that.
on my time away from the racetrack.
So curious. That's so amazing.
Yeah.
You know, truth is stranger than fiction.
I know.
What does a professional, champion funny car driver do? He fixes elevators.
And likes it.
And
Well,
was there,
but
yeah.
I think a lot of the fans have the misperception that we make $500,000 to $1 million a year. Now, if you're the team owner and you can get a $6 million sponsorship and you only spent $5 million, you just made $1 million a year. But you also took all the chances and made all the sacrifices,
yeah.
and you deserve
Yes,
that.
you did.
If you're a hired gun in Nitro, what we make is very fractional compared to a NASCAR driver or an F1 driver, and I kind of like it. I think it keeps us very blue collar. Right. I think it keeps both feet on the ground. When you can't afford to go buy an airplane or a $2 million house, you don't seclude yourself from the world. And it's no knock on the NASCAR drivers. That program over there is fantastic. But I still am a working class guy because I need to have an income.
Geez, I swear to God, I need him on for another hour. We're not gonna, and we can't. But I'm so, because I know the inner workings of a bunch of different motorsports. With your current contract, it's like, are you allowed to have endorsements? Are you allowed to make money out of if someone walks up to you and says, hey, we'd like you to be on the poster for the.
Yeah, well, so
Are
recognize
you
this.
allowed to do that through the Force?
I was brought on to do 8 NHRA national events plus the Norwalk, 9 events for them. I know enough not to poop where you're going to eat. Right?
I get it.
They have the fact that it was my phone
Piss
that
in
rang.
your mess kit.
Yeah, but there's a lot of competent drivers out there that they could have called, and they called me. I wouldn't do anything, even if I knew that it's going to end after the next 2 races. I would never do anything to jeopardize that friendship and that relationship with John Force, with Robert Hyde.
Oh, and I'm not saying do anything funky. I'm saying,
Yeah.
are you allowed to?
I don't know. Did you want to offer me a ridiculous amount of money for
Nice.
doing something? I can always run it past
That's
them.
that's
Yeah.
next level.
Well, I
right
know
there.
a new
like it.
brand of shirts that are going to be coming out that,
Well, there you go. But
We
So,
could-
so you know the
Now
same.
we've got a funny car on the shirt too.
Yeah, better to ask.
Wink.
Yeah.
Wait, not
There you
this
go.
one. This is the Deuce, not the
Oh,
funny
okay.
car.
I'm with you.
But I've got a funny. I'm pretending he's not here right now.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Good news is my hearing's not that good right now. But
What?
you know the saying, better to beg forgiveness than ask permission. I would never do that in a scenario
Right,
like this.
right. No.
John and Robert entrusted me, not just, by the way, not just John
I
and
don't want to
Robert.
go down the wrong road. I'm not
Well,
suggesting.
listen.
I'm saying, do they allow
Yeah,
that?
well, let me frame this. When Robert called me, this was days after John's accident. There's only one reason my phone was going to ring, and it was Robert Hyde, president of JFR. And so as I'm staring at it and trying to hit, yes, the answer is yes. I want to say yes. But all the thoughts that were going through my mind as I answered it, and he was very clear about it. He says, I'm not offering you the job. I'm asking you if you're interested. Because if you're not interested, I move past this. If you are interested, Peak still has to sign off. Chevrolet still has to sign off.
There's a lot of
Cornwell
moving
Tools,
parts, yeah.
Monster.
That's
the
really
Force
cool,
family.
though. All those people agreed that you were great for the spot. How wonderful is that?
That's a
Well,
good
they
sign,
agreed I
yeah.
was adequate for the spot. I like your.
I think
yes.
you're great
We'll
for the
go with
spot.
great.
You let
You're
me
there.
tell you
But,
what's
but
going
when you
on
think
around
about it, how humbling is that not just John Force and Robert Hyde
Oh,
and the
yeah.
whole Force family, but
That's what I'm
every
saying.
one of his sponsors said, yes, we think he would be a good fit for us out on the racetrack.
I said the
representing
same
us.
thing, by the way, when I heard it.
Thank you.
I thought you would be a fantastic fit for that team. And with that, again, Jack Beckman, Fast Jack Beckman, championship earning funny car driver, now filling the unfillable shoes of John Force, at least for the time being. And make sure you get to, well, we got 2 more. We've got Vegas and we've got Pomona. before the season wraps. So if you can get your butt down there, make sure you go down. Go over to the truck, say hi. He's the nicest guy on the planet. Greatest dude.
And
He
hopefully,
really is.
I don't want to tease anything, but first of all, thanks to all the fans here. The next step for John is getting him out to the racetrack. And I think Pomona's really doable
Possible.
because his proximity there. I think Vegas is a possibility.
Oh.
So
Super cool.
how cool would that be to have John Force watch me climb into John
car.
Force's
His
car and warm
Yeah.
up? But I'm afraid to go, kid, that's not how I do it. Let me
I don't do
straighten
it that way.
Exactly.
You're going to break it. So make sure you cheer him on. Make sure you go get a shirt, get a hat, say hi, get his signature, and support your local NHRA driver. We'll see y'all later. This is Car Guy Confessions with, Jason Lewis today.
Howdy.
Of course, Fast Jack Beckman. I'm Steve Strope, and we are brought to you by ARP-bolts.com. And we'd also like to thank the Peterson Museum. As you can see, this basically $1 trillion background we have. Some absolutely stunning vehicles here. And if you are in the LA area, or if you're visiting, I highly recommend you take a couple, 2-3 hours, come down here and enjoy an absolutely top-notch, world-class automotive museum. Thank you again. Appreciate it. And